They are also now recognised as a major source of evidence about the history and culture of the working class. But how can we assess that evidence? What can we learn about labour and society by studying banners? One thing is the importance of tradition and continuity. A modern banner, like this, might display the latest technology, but it also celebrates the workers of the past. But this sense of tradition doesn't mean that all banners have to express the same ideas in the same way. These differences should serve to remind us that each banner was made by and for particular people in particular historical circumstances. So, what's on the banner, the words, the pictures, and the way they're presented should tell us something about those people and those particular historical circumstances. This banner was made for the Operative Bricklayers Society, Watford branch, during the 1880s. The imagery and the design, however, date back to at least 1865, when this membership certificate emblem was produced for the Manchester-Liverpool Order of Bricklayers. That makes this one of the earliest Union banner designs. In the centre is a Roman-style triumphal arch. The settings, however, are Italian Renaissance interpretations of Roman architecture, but built, not surprisingly, of brick. This is St. Peter's in Rome, designed by the Renaissance architect Bramante. On the other side is St. Paul's Cathedral in London, designed by Sir Christopher Wren, but with a dome based on a Bramante design, taken in its turn from a Roman temple. The figure of science points towards London, but looks towards Rome. Beneath the circular Roman tondo, there is a bust of Christopher Wren, making explicit the connections between Wren and Bramante, Rome and London, bricklaying and the best architecture. The revered Roman architect Vitruvius had recommended that the true architect should know both the arts and the sciences. So the allegorical figures of science and art, linked by the Society's name, may well represent this ideal of true architecture. This emphasized the importance of learning and self-education, as well as acknowledging the importance of the practical skills of craftsmen. The square, the bowster, the club hammer and the trowel represent those practical skills. Two current journals are shown. Both were aimed at the skilled workman who aspired to self-improvement and a closer understanding of the aims of the architect. Architect and builder stand together on the sturdy scaffolding, the twin pillars of the building trade. The contemporary bricklayer is presented not as a man who slaps one brick on top of another, but as a master craftsman, a man who knows his worth and his place. His Christian humility is contrasted with the folly and pride of the first bricklayers, the builders of the Tower of Babel. The 4 lines of verse separating the 2 pictures first identify good building practice, and then warn against the excessive ambition of the builders, or perhaps the architects of Babel, who thought they could build a tower to heaven. But this scene isn't just about knowing one's place. It's also used to establish the long tradition of building in brick. The shield is a reference to the more recent tradition of the medieval craft guilds, some of whose coats of arms still hang in the Guildhall in London. The bricklayer's square and boaster are proudly displayed on one side. The heraldic chevron in the centre is used as a general symbol of building from the original meaning of chevron, the meeting point of rafters in a roof, the point of maximum strength. And this stylized bundle of sticks is a classical symbol for strength through unity. One stick alone may be easily broken, the bundle bound together may not. Just as a worker alone may be broken, but many together will not. So the heraldic emblem stands not just for excellence in craft, but also for unity, and for a certain strength and bargaining power in relation to the employers. Because trade societies like the operative bricklayers restricted the admission of apprentices and guarded their skills, they were able to exert some control over the labour market and get higher wages for their members. They also had some success in improving working conditions, and not just for themselves. The relatively unskilled brickmakers weren't actually members of the Bricklayers' Society at all. Brickmaking was a filthy, ill-paid job, mainly carried out by women and young girls, and carrying with it the risk of sickness and rheumatism brought on by being continuously saturated with water from the clay. Between 1867 and the late 1870s, the OBS successfully campaigned to improve those working conditions, though they remained less than ideal. While not unwilling to take industrial action or support other craft unions if there was a strong chance of success, the skilled unions tended to rely on a policy of moderation and conciliation, on parliamentary pressure brought through the London Trades Council. This respectable pursuit of reform through the process of law was part of an emphatic endorsement of dominant Victorian values and virtues. So, justice is flanked by 2 lictors, the Roman symbols for power and discipline. There are also personifications of other moral virtues, like truth and prudence. And there's the dove of peace and the hive of industry. But perhaps the greatest of all Victorian virtues was that of self-reliance, and the 4 corner vignettes illustrate the mutual benefits available to members of the Operative Bricklayers' Society. It was this kind of insurance that had been one of the main functions of the friendly societies which preceded the unions. Friendly societies originated in the 18th century, when the organising of labour into combinations was largely illegal. To protect themselves, the friendly societies tended to adopt the symbols and rituals of other contemporary secret societies, particularly the Freemasons. This elaborate Masonic regalia is decorated with recurring symbols, dividers, set squares, and arches. Freemasonry symbolized God as the great architect and builder of the universe, and as the eye which watches over the world, seeing everything. Much of this quasi-religious symbolism seems to have been carried through into the imagery and design of the emblems and the banners of the newly legalized trade unions. The arch, with God as the keystone, was a potent symbol in Freemasonry. So are many of the other details in the OBS banner. But we mustn't forget that unlike the Freemasons, the square, the dividers and trowels weren't just ritual symbols to the bricklayers. They were the essential tools of their trade. Although we don't know who was responsible for this banner design, we do know that in many cases the executive committee of the union chose the designer, briefed him, and then approved his final design. For the earlier 1865 emblem, the union had chosen a professional artist, A.J. Wardby, who exhibited 3 pictures during the 1840s at the Royal Academy. Although we haven't been able to trace them, we can assume, since they were exhibited, that he was reasonably successful in adhering to the conventions of respectable Victorian art, epitomized by this picture by the Academy President, Eastlake. However, commercial success in the Victorian high art world seems to have eluded Wardby, and he turned to designing union certificates. But it's hardly surprising to find that he wanted to see this kind of work as part of his high art practice. This painted emblem was, he said, intended not only to serve the purpose of trade emblem, but to form an elaborate and interesting work of art. So his portrayals of labour on the emblem and on the banner were probably influenced by the academic conventions of Victorian genre paintings, like Sir Edwin Landseer's The Stonebreaker and His Daughter from 1830. This is a romanticised, picturesque and sentimentalised image of work, even though it refers to the historical reality of contemporary road improvements. Equally respectable misrepresentations of working conditions were found in improving popular publications like Cassell's Saturday Journal. Their idealised version of match production at Bryant and Mace factory from December 10, 1877, contrasted bitterly with the poverty and disease actually experienced by the match girls. Constant contact with the phosphorus used to make the matches caused many of the girls to suffer from a bone-crumbling condition known as phossy jaw. Wardby's image of sickness again relates in style and content to academic paintings like Alexander Farmer's An Anxious Hour from 1865. But this kind of semi-academic respectability didn't come cheap. In 1867, Wardby charged the stonemasons £473. Today that would be over £10,000 for designing and engraving these plates for their emblem. 2 years later, he charged the OBS a quarter of that, just £115, for their painted emblem. But then this was an off-the-peg design, using words and symbols which he'd originally designed for the stonemasons. Members of both these societies were among the best paid workers in the country. Their rates of benefit were high, But then so were their entrance fees. Mind you, a society needed to be rich to afford a banner like this. The money paid to Wardby only covered the design. After that, they had to pay a professional banner manufacturer to produce the finished article. So the bricklayers were clearly prepared to pay the price of respectability. Hand-painted on heavy silk and about 10 feet square, the banner was suspended from ornate carrying poles. It was, and still is, a prestigious and precious object. As the banner of a craft union, its images express pride in craft skills, tradition, moral virtue, moderation and respectability, and upward mobility. These ideas were addressed to branch members, potential members, other trade societies and employers. And the banner was displayed at branch meetings, demonstrations and exhibitions as a powerful public statement of the attitudes, interests and concerns of the society. But although craft unions like the OBS were still powerful and continued to be so, in the 1880s new unions of semi-skilled and unskilled workers were also being formed, often like the match girls as a result of industrial action. Championed by the socialist, Mrs. Annie Besant, the plight of the match girls became a moral cause célèbre outside of socialist ranks. A year after, the National Society of Gas Workers went on strike. And then, in 1889, the dock workers struck for a raise in their hourly pay from 5p to 6p. The experience of the strike directly inspired the writing of the words of the Labour anthem, The Red Flag. During the strike itself, there were frequent peaceful marches around the city with brass bands and homemade banners to keep the dispute in the public eye. Following the successful conclusion of the dock strike, professional banners were produced for the Dockers' Union. This one, for the export branch, does have some obvious similarities with the bricklayer's banner. It's large, of course, and brightly coloured. It uses an academic convention, Hercules wrestling with a serpent. But overall, the Dockers' banner is much less complicated. It's more crudely painted. It's much less detailed. And although some of the corner ornamentation is painted, most of it is actually ready woven into the silk by a jacquard loom process patented by the manufacturers Tuttill's. Tuttill's 1896 catalogue advertised similar types of design for this size of banner for between 22 and 27 guineas. With the additional extras of carrying poles, harness, and tasselled cords, the whole thing would have worked out at around £50, slightly over £1,000 today. There are no references to benefits, because many of the new unions concentrated solely on building up strike benefit funds. They set aside the friendly society role played by the craft unions. The slogans are more aggressively worded, speaking of a need for general social change, an attitude which the Dockers founders, Ben Tillett and Tom Mann, declared in 1890 to be the crucial difference between the old and new unions. But these challenging slogans are actually quotations from Cardinal Manning, who'd campaigned and negotiated successfully on behalf of the dock unions. His action was part of a new trend in Catholic social policy, supporting the combination of working men on the grounds that poverty and exploitation bred physical and moral degradation. Preached to the largely Irish Catholic population of London's Dockland, it presented the struggle between labourer and employer as a holy war, but in the cause of moral reform, not social revolution. Given this basically Catholic interpretation of Manning's words, Hercules' struggle with the snake is rather more likely to symbolise man's eternal struggle against evil, Adam versus Satan, rather than the revolutionary struggle of socialism against the constriction of capitalism. Nevertheless, it's still possible to identify in these banners general distinctions between the concerns and interests of the old and the new unions. It's tempting to see the craft unions as entirely conservative and cautious, and the new unions as radical and socialist. But we can't really identify such marked polarities. We have only to see a banner like this to show that such an assumption would be wrong. This banner celebrates the unity between English and Australian dock unions during the 1889 strike and commemorates the huge Australian donation of nearly £30,000. This funded the strike for almost 5 weeks. Heroic Australian and British workers are shown united in a common struggle, a powerful symbol of international solidarity. But it's a union blessed by Britannia and the Union Jack, conventional symbols of the power of the British Empire. This might seem strange to us, but without the Empire there might never have been an Australian dock movement to support the London strike. So in 1890, it was possible for these images and the apparently contradictory values they expressed to stand side by side.